We're going to be talking about the Charles Jeffrey show that we had last night. Just because it was so interesting and there were so many different references and so many different kind of takes to kind of view this collection, and that, you know, we reviewed it on SHOWstudio, Georgie and I, last night, but I just thought it was worth talking about again, mainly because there's so much to talk about with Charles's work. There's always so many references, so many different small points that turn, you know, they're just so interesting. So gonna wait for Nick to come back online. Hopefully we don't lose connection again, which is what just happened. And yeah, we will discuss. But no, I mean, it was a really, really amazing start to, yesterday was a really great start to fashion, to menswear, and also in general, just the great thing about London, I guess, is that it is such a exciting way to start the season, because you have all these young designers who really, really have an angle and really, really want to say something about the world and how we're living, you know. And obviously you see beautiful things in Paris, and you see beautiful clothes and couture and all of that. However, also, I don't know why Nick's not add him in. But you go and see couture, and that's amazing, but it can often not always lack a particular voice, because they have a very specific client that they need to satisfy. Whereas in London, lots of the younger designers, they don't have that need by a specific client. Sorry, I was rambling whilst I was waiting for you, Nick.
Don't try and blame it on me.
I wasn't. I was just
you and your rubbishy 4G connection.
Nah. Anyway, yeah. So sorry if anyone who was watching before when we just dropped off. That was 100% my fault. But yes, sorry.
His fault. However, you have got a fine sweater on there, Calum. I like the look of your European Union sweater.
It's pertinent to what I'm going to say, believe it or not. As I always end.
Yes. How are you going to manage to get Brexit into this Charles Jeffrey review?
Easily.
Really?
Yeah,
easily.
A huge part.
I can get Brexit into anything because it's an abomination, but I'll be interested to see it. Anyway, we were just recapping slightly our relationship to Charles Jeffrey, who used to come into SHOWstudio 4 or 5 years ago as an illustrator when he was at Central St. Martin's as one of our fashion illustrators. And he was as flamboyant and as amazing looking as he is now. Charles Jeffrey, interestingly, is an incredible looking man. I mean, he's a very, very handsome, very tall, very charming, sort of dandy in real life. So, you know, and I think to some degree that plays into the persona and plays into the, you know, the appeal of Charles. You know, he is, you know, a great sort of, you know, he's a great character. And if you wanted somebody to look like a contemporary fashion designer, you have this sort of 6 foot something, you know, incredibly friendly and incredibly dandy young man. You know, just in himself, he is very charming. And so he worked with SHOWstudio right at the beginning as an illustrator, and we still sell his illustrations. You know, I remember one that sticks in my mind is that he illustrated one of the collections just by using the till receipts from Waitrose. So he'd illustrate on anything, paper cups or, you know, receipts or anything at all. And of course, we were all a little bit sort of, okay, Charles, fine. But then, you know, it fits in perfectly to where he went in the end, or not in the end, but what his journey is like. It's very coherent with what he's doing now. Yeah. So we still have Charles Jeffrey's illustrations for sale on SHOWstudio. Yeah. No, I think it is really pertinent. Is this whole idea of kind of make the amend almost, and it is just whatever. It's not so much about the medium in which Charles chooses to create something, or the form of it. It's about the ideas behind it, and it's just this pure creativity, and that really got him started. But actually, without losing too much of that, the show was a bit of a departure to that. This season. Really? I mean, there was still, because he's been painting. You know, his first collections were him painting on jeans and painting his illustrations, skirts and shirts, and that was really, you know, hand done. And looked amazing, and everyone wanted it. And so I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but it was very hand done. Whereas this actually was his first foray into kind of couture. Obviously, it's not made in Paris, all of that, but into this, you know, handmade, high embroidery, lots of kind of the couture mindset. Let's say the kind of couture definitions of what clothing is. If you look, for example, the last look was a big
kind of sheath dress that was in nude organza, I think. And it was a whole bit frayed, a bit tatty, and then it had these beautiful embroideries and in gems and rocks and black cotton, I think, of his illustrations. So he's gone from painting on receipts to us to doing it in huge swathes of beautiful embroideries. So that's a lovely progression in itself. But these beautiful ornate embroideries are kind of contrasted with a ripped up nude dress, and then the fact that it was also worn by a man who was wearing kind of very high-waisted pants with a big bulge, basically, to kind of give it that dichotomy and that weird, and take something that is so beautiful, but put it somewhere you wouldn't automatically expect to see it. I mean, you wouldn't see that in Paris with a couture show, but it's just as good, if not more interesting, to see it presented in this context. But anyway, so last night really was a show of juxtapositions and opposing ideas. And for anyone who saw, or anyone who hasn't seen it, you should go to it. Georgie and I reviewed it last night from the back of a Rolls Royce, and it was such a all-encompassing, exciting experience. We were so overjoyed, and we were talking about, the references were Peter Pan and this childlike sense. And we finished the live stream and went home, and I'm still at my boyfriend's right now, and we were talking. And actually, there was a darker aspect that we didn't necessarily notice at the time, because we were so excited by it, and it was felt, actually, and I knew I could feel it, but we didn't talk about it. So I thought this would be a good place to talk about it, because another reference was Berlin in the 20s, and that kind of roaring 20s. And in the press release, Charles says something like he wants everyone to look after everything that's smaller than them. So instead of looking up and looking at your trajectory and looking at all the people who are doing better than you, is actually you could look after everyone who is smaller than you, and you should bring them up, and that will bring you up in turn. And Simon Costin, who was the first time he's worked with, first time he's worked with him, which I think was a match made in heaven, had put crashed chandeliers all around the floor in kind of old ornate bathtubs. It was really stunning. It was really,
just again, a bit of history for a lot of people who won't know who Simon Costin is. Simon Costin was originally a jewellery designer back in the 90s.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he made jewellery for your grandmother, actually. And he used to make it out of animal skulls. So he'd get like a rabbit skull or a bird skull, and he'd put jewels in the eye sockets and paint it and enamel it and everything else. So he used to make this incredible jewellery, which is collected by the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I think that they have some of it. So if you want to see some of Simon Costin's jewellery, go to contact the Victoria and Albert Museum. But Simon Costin became, after being a jewellery designer, became an art director for Alexander McQueen. Or became an art director and worked with Alexander McQueen, and they worked on some of these early shows. Simon Costin, again, is a very lovely man. You're talking about people who are very gentle in their spirit and very open-minded. And I think all those sorts of things play into are part of what you're describing about Charles and his way of working. Simon Costin also runs a museum of folklore in Britain.
And is an extremely knowledgeable person on all things slightly off-centre. That's where he finds them. Whenever you speak to him, he's brimming with references and just wants people to he wants to bring people into that world, which I think is where him and Charles met really well, is they both have these worlds that are very particular, but they're very open about. You can meet designers who actually want to be solitary in their creative world, which is fine. That's a process, and some people need that solitude. But people like Simon and Charles, they want as many people in there as possible, and it's about getting other people to. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That openness in their creativity.
Yes, I understand it completely. Just again on Simon Costin's past, he worked very well with Gareth Pugh as well, which is it's not the same thing, but these are people of a similar sort of spirit, if you want. When you imagine if you were in a room with them, they'd all get on.
Gareth was there last night.
Was he? Okay.
Yes, I think they're good friends.
Yeah, and I would have thought so. I mean, these are kindred spirits. Some of the sort of poets of our age. We look to try and define ourselves by our culture. I mean, perhaps in the past we'd looked to painters and to poets, But, you know, fashion designers like Charles Jeffrey, Alexander McQueen, Gareth Pugh are our contemporary poets, are our contemporary artists. And these are people who, you know, who are athletes. You know, that's the right way of saying the word, but, you know, people who are so attuned to the finer things of life and the poetic things and the more marginal things of life, which of course is what you want from artists. You want artists to be able to show you things you don't see, to describe worlds that perhaps, you know, you haven't perceived. You know, artists are incredibly sensitive people, and that's what you want. You want people who are so sensitive. The problem being is, of course, because they're sensitive to every part of life, not just to the creative part. But so often life becomes too hard for them. So, you know, you end up with unfortunately people like Isabella Blow or Alexander McQueen taking their own lives because they can't actually deal with the sensitivity that they have. But that's what you want in an artist. You want somebody who is, you know, who will be transported with, you know, huge bounds of joy by, you know, the turning of the, the turning of a page in a book or a leaf on the ground or seeing somebody in the street, or you want people to be inspired.
Doing things that you can't see.
Things you can't see, and also things that just pass us by that we don't realise. That's what you want from your artists. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing, and you saw the show. We should talk about the show a bit more.
No, I mean, so I won't go into all of it because so much happened, and anyone who does want to kind of run down of the show and kind of some other opinions on it, if you go on SHOWstudio or SHOWstudio's YouTube, George and I have reviewed it there in a Rolls Royce straight after the show. We literally got out of the show and sat down and turned on a like button and live streamed from there. So really honest reaction. The thing that I wanted to talk about is there were all these people from Theo Adams' dance company, and they were kind of they were dressed in the clothes, so they were as much models as they were actors. But they were kind of doing little scenes with each other, and they were kind of acting reasonably childlike. And so in front of me, I had a big bathtub, a big freestanding bath, and there were two of these actors in there reading books and play fighting with them, and this childlike innocence. And that was so exciting to me at the time that I didn't really notice that obviously around them we're in Wapping, in a huge dilapidated building, an old industrial building that had been disused and was falling apart. And around us was all these crashed chandeliers, and obviously there was this dichotomy of the childlike innocence mixed with actually something that or the way I read into it afterwards, is actually something pretty terrible had just happened, but these children hadn't realised. Or these children were trying to make it better, at least, if they had realised. And, you know, if you're looking at the 20s, you know, the roaring 20s, if you look at what happened straight afterwards with all of this kind of with people not paying attention in the 20s, or, you know, or straight afterwards, whatever happened, there was a huge, you know, we had World War II. And, you know, it totally changed the way people lived. And we went from this huge kind of growing international society in the 20s that was just coming about with modern transport to all killing each other. And think of what's happening now. For Charles to show a collection about childlike innocence, looking after the person below you, and the 20s, it's very important and actually very dark. But so beautifully and well presented through a childlike innocence of Peter Pan, who just doesn't realise or doesn't want to know this stuff's happening in the world. It was so clever, and it took me embarrassingly long to figure it out.
That's all right, but you're not supposed to. I mean, these are poetic offerings. They're not slogans. You know, this is some sort of daft Trumpian kind of or Brexit type slogan that means nothing and just people spout again and again. This is a reflection on life, a poetic reflection on life. So I keep going back to this idea that these people like the contemporary Byrons, you know, they're our poets. And fashion should be applauded for that they give space and gives platform to people with such, incredibly high levels of aesthetic comprehension of the world and proposals. Fashion's so dumbed down by, most of the publications that cover it, into a sort of being just about business, or, it's a beautiful art form where people express themselves. I've worked with Alexander McQueen, with Yoji Yamamoto, with Gareth Pugh, and with Charles Jeffrey. These are all people who are incredibly important culturally and poetically. And that's why I keep on staying within fashion, because it's a world which I find, you know, is permanently full of people who are inspiring and inspire me endlessly. So, you know, I'm not surprised by what you say about Charles. It sounds an amazing show. And yes, please go and see it on SHOWstudio and look at the review and listen to what George and you say in the roles. And, you know, and I just think, you know, it's a very exciting thing, and one can feel very negative at the moment. And I understand what you're saying about how, you know, perhaps, you know, people are in some way hedonistic and kind of, you know, not wanting to confront the realities of what's happening in the world, and they need to. People need to take control, and they need to get out and vote, and they need to do all the sorts of things they can do and lobby their MPs. The sad thing is that fashion, which is such a fragile and beautiful medium, you know, is going to be decimated by Brexit. That's, you know, that's awfully sad. And people like Charles Jeffrey are probably going to find it incredibly hard to make their way. So, and you know, of course, the main media has no idea of that and sees fashion as a sort of silly, lightweight bit of vanity. Which, of course, it's not any more than painting or poetry or ballet or opera.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's our
No, I agree. And I'm wearing my jumper. Full support today. But no, I just thought it was really beautiful. And I'm sure for a lot of people in the room, the kind of nuance of it kicked in a lot faster than I. But I was so kind of just bewildered and excited. I totally missed out. I thought, oh, I love that coat or whatever, you know. But it was just really interesting. And kudos to Charles. And I think you really stepped it up. And we'll talk about it on another live stream, but there is a lot of belief that this is the end of London Fashion Week Men's. This is possibly the last season of it. That has not been confirmed by anyone. But normally when you walk into the British Fashion Council space, there's a thing that says, see you in June, and the dates. And it's always been kind of an on-running joke. So one day it's not going to be there. This season, there's no dates for next season. So But
what do you think that's due to? Do you think that's due to bringing men and women together?
There's no big brands here. And so the big international press don't come, the big international buyers don't come, because you used to have Burberry, Vivienne Westwood, and they would bring, the press had to come and the buyers had to come from internationally. And then also because you had people, the Charles Jeffrey of the day or the Cottweiler of the day, Cottweiler were around actually, smaller on the schedule. Some of the buyers would go in and some of the press would go in to see that. But now that we have a massive exodus to Paris, the small brands are the biggest name on schedule, so they attract their publications. But then there's lots of smaller people underneath. But lots of people, it's not for internationals. It's not financially worth it for the coverage or the brands that they'll see. So it's looking. So anyway, I mean, this could just be someone forgot to put up a sign. You don't want to say it too much. But Charles is, you know, if that was to happen, Charles could hold his own in a different city or in the women's wear schedule for sure. It was a real testament to him. And that was really exciting to see.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that Brexit doesn't mean Brexit, or whatever that person just wrote. Let's hope that Brexit is cancelled and that we've managed to keep London Fashion Week Men's going and celebrate, you know, the creativity that are in these people's minds. Okay. Well, look, you off to do more shows today?
Yes, I'm off to do more shows today. I've got the Jordan Luca presentation in an hour. I have Gotson at 1.
They're panels, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're on the Per panel straight afterwards. Things. And then Xander, Alex, Kiko, Cottweiler, Fashionista. It's going to be a really, really good day.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, have a lovely time, and I will speak to you, no doubt, at some point during it.
Yes, I'll speak to you in a few hours.
Yes, lovely. All right. Love you very much. Bye, Calum. Bye.